Imagine you were sitting in, well, a multi-million-dollar strategy meeting, right?
Yeah.
And your team is just about to make this massive, incredibly costly mistake.
Oh, we've all been there.
Yeah, exactly. But sitting over in the corner is an intern. And this intern has a photographic memory. They've read every single document, and they know exactly how to fix the problem.
Right.
But because of the unspoken rules of the room, that intern is just going to sit in total silence and literally watch you fail simply because you didn't look over and ask them a direct question.
It's a painful scenario to picture.
It is. And
Yeah.
today, that overly polite, purely reactive intern is, you guessed it, artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
I mean, we have these massive large language models, which are essentially superpowered encyclopedias, but they only speak when spoken to. So welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We are taking you on a mission today to explore what happens when AI doesn't wait to be prompted. We're looking at this really groundbreaking research paper that introduces a framework called CoLabScience.
Yeah, and CoLabScience is, it's a fundamental shift in how we interact with technology. We are looking at a completely new architecture designed to transform these passive tools into proactive, autonomous team members.
Right.
The goal here is an AI that continuously listens to a complex conversation and actually, politely interrupts human experts when it spots a missed connection.
Okay, let's unpack this, because taking an AI from a reactive search engine to an active collaborator, it sort of feels like science fiction. Let's start with the real-world stakes. Why is a reactive AI just not cutting it anymore, especially in high-level fields like, say, biomedical research?
What's fascinating here is that the reactive nature of AI, it actively limits discovery in collaborative environments because, well, humans just don't always know what they don't know.
Right, you can't Google a question you don't know exists.
Exactly. Think about a team of scientists brainstorming. If you don't know the exact right question to type into an AI prompt box, you never get the insight, you just miss critical connections.
Yeah.
And in biomedicine, missing a biochemical correlation during a planning meeting, it doesn't just result in a slightly less effective brainstorm. In drug discovery, going down an off-target research path could mean, months of wasted laboratory time and millions of dollars spent chasing a biological ghost.
Which brings us to a really great example from the sources. They outline this scenario that makes the stakes incredibly clear. They describe a simulated medical team trying to develop a therapy targeting a specific tumor suppressor gene. I think it's called PTEN, specifically for hormone-negative breast cancer.
Right, a very complex, very specific target.
Yeah, and the clinical physician and the pharmacologist are just going back and forth, really getting deep into the weeds, discussing cell lines and signaling changes. And a standard reactive AI is just sitting in the background doing absolutely nothing, because nobody stopped to type, hey, AI, what are we missing?
Well, and the humans in that room are engaged in the messy, flowing process of collaborative thought. They're bouncing ideas, they're changing directions, speaking in shorthand.
Yeah, they aren't exactly pausing to formulate a perfectly structured query for a database.
Exactly. But when the researchers run that exact same conversation through CoLabScience, this new proactive model, the entire dynamic changes. Because the AI is actively tracking the chat, it realizes the humans are missing a crucial piece of the genetic puzzle.
Right, and it autonomously jumps in. And I love the phrasing it uses. It's brilliant. It says, excuse me, may I provide a suggestion? PTN loss often co-occurs with PIK3CA or TP53 mutations. It just gently redirects the team to a critical genetic correlation they were actively overlooking.
And that single intervention completely alters the trajectory of their research. The AI isn't just fetching data anymore. It's analyzing the semantic flow of the human conversation. It's comparing it against the defined goals of the project, identifying a divergence, and then literally deciding that the value of speaking up outweighs the cost of interrupting.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
But I'm picturing, well, anyone who has ever used a smart speaker at home that randomly starts talking in the middle of a dinner party knows where I'm going with this.
Oh, absolutely.
If an AI is constantly listening to a group of brilliant, fast-talking scientists, how does it keep track of everything without getting hopelessly confused? And maybe more importantly, how does it avoid becoming that incredibly annoying person in the room who interrupts every 5 seconds with a, well, actually, factoid?
Yeah, that is the million-dollar engineering question. If you have a massive AI model constantly analyzing every single syllable spoken in a meeting just to decide if it should speak, the computational cost would be astronomical.
Right, it would be so laggy.
Incredibly slow, and
Yeah.
it would probably interrupt constantly, like you said. So to solve this, the researchers behind CoLabScience developed an underlying architecture called the PULI mechanism.
Right, PULI.
PULA.
Yeah.
Which stands for Positive Unlabeled Learning to Intervene.
The genius of PULI is that it uses a dual-brain architecture. It relies on reinforcement learning to basically balance two entirely different large language models.
Okay.
To put it simply, it divides the labor to save computing power and eliminate latency.
Here is where it gets really interesting, because to me, it's just like a live television news broadcast. Okay, I like that comparison.
Yeah, think about it. You have the producer sitting in the control room, wearing the headset, monitoring all the live camera feeds, the breaking news wires, the timing of the show. The producer is taking in a massive amount of real-time data, but saying very little to the actual audience. They are just waiting for the right moment.
Right.
Then you have the news anchor at the desk. The anchor is the one with the polished delivery, the deep contextual knowledge, the one who actually tells the complex story to the public. But the anchor only speaks when the producer in their earpiece gives them the green light.
That maps perfectly onto the 𝗕𝗨𝗨 framework, actually. In this system, your producer is what they call the observer LLM.
Okay.
The observer is a small, highly efficient, lightweight model. Because it's small, it can run constantly in real time without massive computational drag. Its entire job is to look at the ongoing conversation and answer a single binary question. Do I intervene right now, or do I stay silent?
So it's basically sitting there going, nope, nope, wait, yes.
Exactly. And when the observer finally says yes, it wakes up the anchor. And that is the presenter LLM.
Got it.
The presenter is a much larger, more sophisticated scale model. It requires a lot of computing power, which is exactly why you keep it asleep until you absolutely need it. When activated, the presenter takes the context, formulates the scientifically accurate suggestion, like that PTN mutation insight we talked about, and delivers it to the team.
And managing the relationship between these two brains is the coordinator, right?
Yep. The coordinator is the reinforcement learning agent optimizing the balance between them. This is actually where the positive unlabeled part of the name comes in.
Oh, right, the PU.
Yeah. The positive refers to the exact right moments to jump in. The unlabeled refers to the massive sea of normal ongoing conversation where the AI should just stay completely quiet. The coordinator looks at both and trains the observer on the timing while training the presenter on the quality of the content.
But, and here's my question, to be a good producer or a good observer, you really need to remember what the meeting is actually about. You can't just react to the last sentence spoken. So how does this AI actually remember the context of a 2-hour planning session without drowning in data?
That's a great point. It divides its memory into 3 distinct layers.
Okay.
First, there is the project proposal. This is the foundational context. It's the overall goals of the research, the background knowledge, the specific data sets they are using. This part never changes. It's the North Star of the meeting.
So it's basically the reason everyone is in the room to begin with.
Exactly. Then you have the long-term memory. As the meeting progresses, the AI doesn't try to memorize every single word verbatim. That would be too much. Instead, it periodically uses a summarizer function to compress the earlier rounds of dialogue into key accumulated insights.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah. And finally, you have the short-term memory, which is strictly limited to the current utterance and the 2 immediately preceding it.
Okay, I see. So explain how the observer actually uses those 3 specific layers to spot a mistake.
Well, the observer is constantly comparing the short-term memory, basically what the scientists are saying right this second, against the project proposal. Let's say the project proposal is entirely focused on lowering blood pressure, but the short-term memory shows the doctors are suddenly going deep into a discussion about liver enzymes that have absolutely nothing to do with the primary goal.
They've gone off on a tangent.
Right. The moment those 2 memory layers contradict each other or drift too far apart, the observer recognizes the divergence. It hits the red button, pulls in the long-term memory for context, and wakes up the presenter to course-correct the team.
And by splitting the architecture into the observer and the presenter, the researchers solve the latency issue, which is huge. The sources note that this split system, once hooked up to audio systems, takes about 0.8 seconds per turn to make a decision and respond. I mean, that is incredibly fast.
It has to be. If an AI takes 10 seconds to process a conversation and formulate a thought, the human conversation has already moved on.
Yeah, they're on to the next topic.
Exactly. The moment for intervention has passed. The 2-tier architecture is what makes real-time, low-latency intervention computationally feasible.
So the anchor and producer are ready, but here's the catch for me. An AI doesn't inherently know what a polite interruption actually sounds like. I mean, if you just turn it on, it's going to interrupt every time someone stutters or repeats a word, right?
Yeah.
How do you teach a machine the social grace of holding its tongue?
That brings us to the training ground they built. It's this massive new dataset called BSDD, or the Biomedical Streaming Dialogue dataset. Because, as you can imagine, there wasn't a pre-existing database of highly technical, multi-person scientific planning meetings with perfectly labeled intervention points.
They had to build it from scratch.
They did.
And they generated 3,206 simulated multi-role scientific dialogues. They grounded these simulations in real, published PubMed papers covering incredibly complex topics. We're talking cancer, Alzheimer's, sepsis.
Yeah, and they created 4 distinct AI personas for these simulations: a pharmacologist, a medicinal chemist, a bioinformatician, and a clinical physician.
Wow.
And each had specific, carefully prompted responsibilities. The medicinal chemist was focused on compound structure, the bioinformatician on data analysis, and so on. They basically set these AI personas loose to discuss a real biomedical problem derived from a PubMed paper.
Right.
This forced the CoLabScience model to learn how to interact with different domain experts, all with their own priorities and, vocabularies.
Okay, wait, I'm getting stuck on this. You're telling me they trained this proactive AI using other AIs that were just role-playing as humans humans based on medical literature. I mean, that sounds like a massive echo chamber. How does an AI hallucinating a conversation teach another AI how to talk to real humans?
This raises an important question, and it's a critical point of skepticism. You really cannot solely rely on an AI to grade its own homework when the end goal is human collaboration. So, to validate the simulation, they brought in actual human experts, real medical doctors, and PhD candidates. These humans evaluated a random sample of the simulated dialogues and the chosen intervention points.
And what did the humans think? Did it hold up?
It did. The human experts heavily agreed with the dataset's choices. They gave the positive interventions an average score of 3.82 out of 5 for timing and 4.21 out of 5 for quality. It proved that the AI training ground, despite being completely simulated, was actually incredibly realistic and scientifically rigorous.
There's another training trick they use that I found brilliant. To prevent the AI from becoming that annoying interrupter we talked about earlier, they use a strategy called sparse labeling.
Yes, sparse labeling is key here. In a sprawling, multi-turn conversation, there might be several places where an AI could theoretically add a tiny bit of value.
Like correcting a minor date or something.
Right. Exactly. But if it interrupts at every minor opportunity, it degrades the human collaborative process. People get annoyed. So, in the BSDD training set, the researchers only labeled the single, absolute, most goal-divergent dialogue round in a transcript as the positive place to intervene.
Literally the moment the team drifted furthest from the main objective.
Exactly. By only labeling the most critical point of failure, they aren't just teaching the AI when to speak. They are essentially teaching the AI to tolerate minor human mistakes. It learns that collaboration requires letting the small stuff slide.
Which is a profoundly human trait to program into a machine.
He really is.
Okay, so we have the dual-brain POI architecture. We have the rigorous BSDD training ground. The AI has been built and it has been educated. Now it is time for the final exam. How did CoLabScience actually perform when put to the test against the current heavyweight models in the industry?
Well, the researchers ran a comprehensive suite of tests, comparing the POLI framework against several baselines. They tested it against models that just randomly intervened and models that relied on in-context learning.
Which basically means just giving the AI a few examples in its prompt and hoping it figures out the pattern, right?
Right, exactly. And they ran these tests across different open-source model families, specifically LLMA3 and Qwen3.
And the results are really where we get our David versus Goliath moment. Because the POLI framework, using relatively small open-source models, specifically the LLMA3 pairing, significantly outperformed the baselines. In intervention timing, which is simply knowing the correct moment to speak up, the LLMA3 POLI model hit an accuracy of 67.4%.
Which is impressive on its own. But the true Goliath moment is when they ran cross-backbone comparisons.
Okay, explain that.
In simple terms, that means they didn't just test POLI on one type of AI brain. They unplugged the framework and attached it to completely different AI foundations, from smaller open source models to massive closed systems, just to prove the architecture itself was the secret sauce.
I see.
And they tested their small POLI framework against the massive closed source state-of-the-art model from OpenAI, the GPT-4o pair.
And the small POLI model beat the giant.
It did. The LLMA3 POLI model achieved a win rate of 45.8% compared to the GPT-4o baseline, which only managed an 18.3% win rate in this specific proactive intervention task.
Wow.
It proved that a smaller model, specifically trained with this dual brain reinforcement learning architecture, is far more effective at the nuanced task of proactive timing than a massive generalized model trying to do it all at once.
And it wasn't just automated metrics either. They brought the human experts back for a blind taste test.
The ultimate test, yeah. They had human experts evaluate the interventions blindly, comparing the GPT baseline against the POLI framework. The humans scored POLI a 4.65 out of 5 for timing and a 4.60 for helpfulness.
That's incredibly high.
It is. In every single human-evaluated dimension, the proactive POLI architecture beat the standard reactive approach.
So what does this all mean for you listening? I mean, right now this technology is being rigorously tested to cure diseases faster, right?
Yeah.
To stop a team of pharmacologists from spending 6 months researching the wrong protein pathway. But the underlying architecture, this POLI framework, is entirely domain agnostic.
Completely.
It doesn't inherently care if the topic is breast cancer or bridge construction. So think about the implications. Very soon you might have a proactive AI sitting in on your own weekly marketing syncs, or your software engineering scrums, or your legal strategy meetings.
Yeah.
Just a silent, perfectly attentive partner that politely clears its throat and points out the specific liability clause your entire legal team just talked right past.
That is exactly the horizon we are looking at. But, as with any foundational shift, there are limitations to acknowledge here. Real human conversations are incredibly messy. We talk over each other, we use slang, we rely on informal reasoning.
We go off on tangents.
Constantly. And in a real meeting, the goals often change dynamically on the fly. A simulated data set, no matter how good it is, struggles to capture that raw chaos.
And there's the latency factor, too.
Right. We mentioned the 0.8-second latency earlier. Now, in the realm of computer processing, that is blisteringly fast. But in the rhythm of human conversation, a 0.8-second pause before an interruption can feel just a fraction of a beat too slow.
Yeah, it can feel like an eternity if the conversation is highly animated.
Exactly. There is still work to be done integrating this perfectly with real-time speech recognition and text-to-speech systems to make it feel entirely natural. But regardless of those hurdles, the conceptual leap from a reactive tool to a proactive collaborator is permanently shifting how we view the role of AI in our professional lives.
We have taken quite a journey today. We started with the frustrating limitations of the polite reactive AI. We unpacked the ingenious two-brained PULI architecture, our fast-thinking producer and our articulate anchor.
Yep.
We explored how researchers taught a machine the art of the polite interruption using simulated experts, effectively teaching it to tolerate human error. And we saw how this targeted, specialized approach allowed a smaller open-source model to take down an industry giant in human-graded testing. CoLabScience is proving that AI can be an active participant in discovery.
It really changes the definition of what an AI assistant is. It's no longer just about having the right answers. It is about having the situational awareness to offer them at the exact right time.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with, something to just mull over long after this deep dive ends. If artificial intelligence gets so incredibly good at this, if it perfects the art of the perfectly timed intervention, never interrupting rudely, always adding flawless ego-free value, and always keeping the group on track, how might that change human behavior?
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
Right. If we spend 40 hours a week working alongside flawless, polite AI collaborators, will that ultimately train us to become better, more empathetic, more patient listeners in our own human-to-human interactions? Or, and this is the flip side, will we just become so spoiled by the machine that we start expecting our human coworkers to be as perfectly timed, concise, and ego-free as the AI?
Will the perfect digital colleague make us better humans? Or just less tolerant of human imperfection?
It's something we are all going to find out together. Because that brilliantly smart, overly polite intern sitting silently in the corner of your meeting room, they are about to find their voice. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep learning, keep exploring, and always keep questioning the world around you.